Well, well, well. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here, then please do me a favour and hit that subscribe button. The annual NFL owners meeting is underway this week. You know, owners, GMs, head coaches from across the league will be at Palm Beach to discuss, and vote on potential rule changes and all of that good stuff, laws and bylaws, all of the kind of nerdy stuff that goes into making the rules within the NFL. Yeah, we get to hear these guys talking to a microphone for what, in some cases, feels like the first time in quite some time. So I do think it provides a great chance for fans to, hear from their respective team owners, GMs, and head coaches on all things off-season news since they last obviously heard from them. As for the Browns, we've heard from Andrew Berry, as well as Jimmy and D. Haslam and Kevin Stefanski over the last day, and got to see them, answer some questions on the team's plans and some of the moves that they've already made. So for today's video, I'm going to highlight, what stood out for me from the interviews and the press conferences, and just give my thoughts on it. Starting with the Haslams, the obvious one, it's the thumbnail, it's the title of this video most likely. Jimmy Haslam brazenly came out and just straight up said that the Browns took a swing with Deshaun Watson and missed. The exact quote was, "We took a big swing and miss with Deshaun. We thought we had the quarterback. We didn't, and we gave up a lot of draft picks to get him. So we've got to dig ourselves out of that hole. It was an entire organization decision, and it ends with D and I. So hold us accountable." The Watson era is officially over. It's been over on this channel for a long time. I've spoken as early as, week 5, week 4 last season, saying that Deshaun Watson should never play for the Cleveland Browns again. Of course, at that time, it was more hope. Then the injury happened. That kind of turned that hope into a probability. And then, of course, everything that's kind of happened since then, it's now, a foregone conclusion, in my opinion, that Watson will never play for the Cleveland Browns again. And I think this is just the cherry on top of that now. The literal owner of the team coming out and said, yeah, we fucked up, basically. So, fair play to Jimmy for actually taking accountability in this situation. I think in the end of the day, it was pretty obvious that this was a decision influenced by, by Jimmy Haslam, and, everyone wanted Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski fired for this, but, I was one of the people that disagreed with that kind of take, because, as I said, Jimmy obviously had a massive involvement in this. He didn't just sit back and then, those guys come to him with the idea of getting Deshaun, and he just went, yeah, do whatever it takes. He definitely had an involvement in it, and this is him taking accountability for that. In regards to, obviously, the straight up comments, he did later clarify that, it was injuries that were the reason Watson failed in Cleveland, but, still, for, as I said, for him to essentially come out and say, yeah, we fucked up, is pretty damning for Watson. Jimmy also spoke about how the Browns weren't going to force a quarterback at number 2. Now, as someone who has been in the camp of not drafting a quarterback number 2 overall all off season at this point, it would be easy for me to sit here and say, yeah, look, I was right, but this literally means nothing. He then went on to say that, if the right guy is there, they'll take him. But if not, then they won't force it. Grass is green and the sky is blue. I I don't really know what else to say. Thanks for stating the obvious, I suppose. But what did interest me about these comments was that he did also say that if they don't find a quarterback in the draft, then it could take a year or two to do so. Now, I don't find this interesting because, I think they're going to tank next year for Nico Iamaleavia, because he plays for Jimmy's alma mater, Tennessee. But the fact that he essentially said, this could take time, pretty much confirmed what I already thought. Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski's jobs are pretty safe. You could argue safer than a seatbelt. You have Jimmy not only taking accountability for the Watson debacle, but, also coming out and saying that he, AB and Stefanski are essentially in this for the long game. The whole swing and miss response in the first place came from a question about why Andrew Berry and Stefanski still have a job. It's probably been one of the most contested positions that I've held over the last couple of years, but I have always held that position that Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski aren't bad at their jobs. Now that doesn't mean that they are faultless of all the Browns, misfortunes during their time here. Of course not. But Stefanski is a great offensive mind and a good head coach, in my opinion. And most people around the NFL, I think, would agree with that. I also think that Andrew Berry is a decent GM who is clearly aligned with Jimmy Haslam on their vision, which is why I've not advocated for him to be fired on this channel or Stefanski in that matter. A lot of people thought they would be out of here after seeing how the Watson experiment went down and how this past season, of course, went down going 3-14. But I consistently held the belief that, they shouldn't be fired for the Watson situation failing, but instead be judged on how they navigate out of it. I doubt it was Andrew Berry's decision to offer Watson, a $230 million fully guaranteed contract after he initially turned the Browns down. And I'm sure as hell it wasn't Kevin Stefanski's. This was, as I said earlier, clearly a move, spearheaded at most and influenced at least by Jimmy Haslam. So I never thought they'd lose their jobs over it if it didn't work out. And of course, it didn't work out. So here we are. They'll be judged by me for how they steer the team past the Watson era, and will clearly be given time, to attempt that by Jimmy Haslam. So thankfully, Jimmy has become far more patient with experience, because I do think that is the right thing to do in this situation. Moving on to Andrew Berry. First thing that caught my eye, probably unsurprisingly, he did say it was unlikely that the Browns trade up to the number 1 overall pick. I've said for a couple of weeks now that I would not be a fan of this. I will actually be ranking, the Browns options at 2, probably for my next video. So spoiler alert, this option isn't that high on that list. I just don't think the Browns are in a position to be giving up more draft assets to move up one spot. They have too many other holes to fill on the roster. I do like Cam Ward. He probably is my QB1 this year, but that doesn't mean he's worth trading up to the number 1 overall pick for. I've spoken about, how I'd be hesitant in drafting him at number 2 overall, let alone giving up draft assets to get him. I don't think any quarterback in this draft is worth giving assets to move up for. Maybe if the Browns get cold feet towards the end of the first round and trade up for a Jalen Milroe or Jackson Dart because they're worried they won't make it to 33, I would understand that move, but, still wouldn't be eager to do it. This could all be a massive smokescreen. Don't get me wrong, and the Browns and Titans are just playing a game of patty cake for the first overall pick. But with how AB kind of spoke about it and framed it, I don't think they actually are that interested. And, I'm glad that they aren't, because as I said, if you want to take a quarterback in the top 5, then just draft Shedeur Sanders at number 2. I personally wouldn't, but if you think he can be a top 16 quarterback, then you just do it. Similar with the other guys, if you think one of them is your guy, then you do what you need to do to get them. As I said, I personally wouldn't touch any of these guys at number 2 or trade back into the first round for one. But if that's what the Browns believe, then that is what they should do. Now to the guy the Browns should draft if they do stick at number 2. Andrew Berry said that Abdul Carter, his stress fracture in his foot, would not prevent the Browns from drafting him. Bear in mind they have already met with Abdul Carter, so they'd have already had a good look into his medicals, and they clearly feel confident that the couple of lingering injuries that he has won't affect him when he gets to the NFL. I've made no secret in my desire to draft Abdul Carter. People are still acting surprised when I say it on social media, but I've literally held this same position all off-season. For me, he is the best player in the draft. I am going to do some prospect dives into a lot of these guys over the next month, and I'll talk more about the, Carter versus a quarterback versus Travis Hunter, that whole debate in a separate video as well. But essentially, the whole we don't need to draft him because we have Miles stuff is just nonsense to me. Even if that was the case, you can never have enough good pass rushers in the NFL. I sing the praises of the depth pieces on this D-line as much as anyone. But, take Miles out and the production halves. Give me Abdul Carter next to Myles Garrett for the next 5 years, man. I'm a bit of a nerd. I love watching good defensive lines, and by drafting Carter, the Browns would be, in my opinion, near the top in regards to the best defensive lines, especially defensive line duos in the NFL. Berry also went on to say that he expects Wyatt Teller to be on the roster next year. Quite a declaration there from him. When the Tevin Jenkins signing was announced, I did question whether this would be the case. They signed a guy who, in my opinion, is a starting caliber guard who is much younger. The writing did appear to be on the wall. But then the Jenkins contract came out, and that man is getting paid pennies. In NFL standards, I would love to be getting paid what he's getting paid. But, that's a depth player contract. Maybe the medicals were really bad, because I have no idea how he did not get more money to actually start somewhere else, let alone play somewhere else. When healthy, he is a starter in this league. I have no doubt in my mind about that. But his contract is so little that I think the Browns can afford to keep Wyatt for at least one more year. Jenkins can be that depth piece, and a very good one at that. And for Wyatt, it could very well be his last year now. I almost expect it to be. But it is one more year at least. Berry also spoke about how they were open to trading back. So, kind of as I mentioned earlier, while it could all be a smokescreen, that how he spoke about not being interested in trading up, he did speak about the idea of trading back with, shall we just say, a bit more of a light or a bit more of a spring in his step as he was talking about it. Clearly an option I think they are way more likely to go. Again, I've said all along, pretty much, if you could swap picks with New York, that is the dream scenario. And you might even still get Carter in that. You probably would still get Carter in that scenario, pick up an extra second. That would be the dream scenario. If the Raiders offered a future first to come up, I'd probably do it. But would they do that now with Geno? Who knows? But the idea of trading back certainly is near the top of the list, if not at the top. So of course, positive to see Andrew Berry entertaining those ideas. He did also say that the team will probably make a quarterback addition before the draft, but the room will probably skew young. Maybe this is true, or maybe he's setting a smokescreen with Atlanta about Kirk Cousins. We will have to wait and see. And speaking of Kirk Cousins, AB did also say that the Falcons quarterback being spotted in Cleveland last week had nothing to do with the Browns. Nothing to do with the Browns. Finally, on AB, he did say that Michael Jr. Had surgery for his knee injury, which unfortunately will keep him out of the off-season workout program. But that was, kind of expected after he suffered the injury later. Was it the last game last season? I think it was the last game, wasn't it? So it was, something we were concerned that he might even miss the start of next season. However, AB did say that, training camp is a likely return date, or more likely return date, which is hopefully the case, as Hall's development, in such little time last year, given the suspension and, all of that stuff. And it was really, really encouraging to see if he can fully recover from the injury, then I'm really excited, for his future as a Brown. So hopefully he can get back for training camp and, as I said, the injury not affect him and kind of just go, carry on from what he built on last season in a really encouraging rookie year. We did also, as I mentioned here, from Kevin Stefanski at the start, at the owners' meeting, he said that they are hosting a private workout with Shadur Sanders, which offensive coordinator Tommy Rees and quarterback coach Bill Musgrave will run. As I said earlier, if you think he's your guy and you think he can be a top 16 quarterback, you take him, regardless of whatever I or anyone else thinks about whether he's worth the number 2 pick. You just draft him if that's what you believe. He did also say that Kenny Pickett is a guy that they definitely believe in, which is slightly worrying when you pair that with Andrew Berry's skewing young comments, as well as saying that he had a chance to saying that Kenny Pickett had a chance to compete for the job. Will Kenny Pickett be starting games next year? Now, I actually somewhat defended the move as a backup perspective, but in terms of starting games, that would be incredibly underwhelming, to say the least, and is something that I can only see being a possibility if they drafted a quarterback at number 2 and Pickett is essentially just starting the season while you get that quarterback ready. The tush push is once again up for debate at the owners' meeting this year, with a potential ban reported to be gathering some momentum amongst different team officials. Pardon me. However, Kevin Stefanski is not one of them, after he came out and said that he doesn't think that the tush push should be banned. And finally, on Stefanski, he confirmed that the Browns will have 1 joint practice with the Panthers and 2 joint practices with the Eagles during this year's training camp. I think those joint practices are really important in regards to off-season preparation and, are arguably better than the actual preseason games in terms of, getting reps in. Only chance you really have to go, mano el mano against another team's starters in a competitive setting before the season starts. So I think having those 2 joint practices with the reigning Super Bowl champion Eagles, who are one of the better teams in the league, of course, they are the Super Bowl champions, that will be invaluable experience for the Browns. You've got to beat the best to be the best, and what way to practice for that than against the best. But that is pretty much everything that stood out for me after hearing from the Haslams, Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski at the owners' meeting. As I said at the start, it's a great chance to get some good information on the team at this point in the off-season. Let me know in the comments, what stood out for you guys, or if you have any different takes on their comments. But that would do it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. If you do enjoy my content, then please drop this video a like, hit the subscribe button. It's free, but it really helps out my channel. You can also check the links in the description to see where you can follow and interact with me on social media. As I always say, I'm trying to build a community of Cleveland Browns fans, and even if I only get to talk to one fan a day, I'm happy because I'm talking Browns football with the best fan base in the world. Thanks again for watching, guys. Have an amazing week, but most importantly, go Browns.